think having a place to go to work is what it represented, what the Granada Studios represented. I almost fooled myself into thinking I had a job as an electronic musician. You know what I mean? Where you got on the tram and you commuted to your place of work and you clocked in on a 9 to 5 kind of situation. Well, it was longer than 9 to 5 actually, you know, but it was a place of work because it had been a place of work.
Walking around and talking to myself, trying to narrate a kind of internal dialogue is really weird. And I mean, for a lot of reasons, I suppose. I suppose naturally I'm editing what I'm saying. You know, you can't, I suppose, fully, you know, genuinely do a stream of consciousness because you're always going to edit. Especially with the knowledge that, you know, I'm being recorded.
Feels like there's a robot malfunctioning and it's just sort of going off on its own and just doing its own thing and just going a bit do something bad.
You need to find a rhythm in the city. Maybe it goes back to ancient times. The city's still an alien place for human beings. I think when you listen to music as you're walking around, it can either set you into the rhythm of the city or it can set you apart.
And it does feel weirdly fitting for the location, you know, machine music in a place of industry and spectacle and constant reinvention.
So a hard industrial city, bad weather, you're more likely to be confined to a studio. So perhaps that's the reason Manchester, Detroit creates tough techno.
The studio that we call the Transmission Suite was the centre of Granada Studios complex. When we were in the early days of 808 State in 1988,
the chances of you getting on TV with an experimental form of music, it's very small. And it's kind of amazing how many times we were allowed access through Granada TV to an audience at 6 at night.
we were consistently supported by a programme called Granada Reports. Tony Wilson was one of the reporters on Granada Reports. Because he was out and about in the city, we were out and about in the city playing, he'd see it and invite you in to the Grand Temple, which was Granada TV.
You know, wandering about the city, exploring the old places around Granada, listening to this, is quite strange. It is very atmospheric, especially with all the new building going on. The variety of sounds on the album matched the things beyond my headphones.
I feel like I'm playing one of those weird Japanese dancing machines where you have to follow the arrows.
I really like this one. I could imagine it being used for Vogue
song, actually. Yeah, this would be an amazing Vogue song.
This is the hub of that temple. The transmission suite is the centre of that power structure that was TV. So I mean, it has an incredible kind of resonance for me. To be in the same building making an album 30 years after we first appeared on TV, literally yards away from this room. And that's why we call the album The Transmission Suite. You know, it was hallowed turf to actually sort of go through those doors into a TV studio for like people like us who were beginning to set foot in music. You know, to go and record a TV programme playing your music that went out down all them TV aerials on every roof into everybody's house. You know, it was just like, it was amazing.
Nice listening really loud while you're walking around. It really does kind of make you create your own little world, and it's just yours.
Just making observations, I suppose, about life, about music, about everything. Walking around certainly helps and adds a kind of, I don't know, dynamism to it maybe. You can sort of find inspiration from all the various...
If I go back to the 1960s, you know, television was this all-powerful voice in our life. And the fact that we knew there was a building in our city that transmitted the TV to us, and you could see it from the train, you could see its glowing massive red neon sign, and you could see this aerial on the roof that kind of gave it a Jerry Anderson vibe. It was like Marineville in Stingray. You know, I feel buildings can make you make music.
Listening to music whilst you're walking around, that's kind of your own soundtrack. Influencing what happens, what you feel, or where you go, or the speed you walk, or the beat.
When the social revolution of rave happened, it was still quite early years for the Walkman. Was only a few years earlier in the 80s. The ability to walk through a crowded city centre with music on was so novel.
I remember the liberation of being able to walk around the streets and listen to, I think the first tape I had was like Parliament. Again, a dance music, but walking up Market Street with that music on, a private party going on your headphones. If you were serious about your Walkman, you got a recording Walkman, and we used to go to the cinema, record films, and then learn the dialogue and learn the layers of the sound in there. So that comes to the table in terms of those influences from filmic stuff. And that was only a few years before we were doing the rave music. So there was a duality with dance music. There was dance music that fulfilled the communion of social space, and there was the dance music that fulfilled the personal space.
Yeah, very rhythmic and sonic, textures and stuff. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to drift off for a minute or two just to listen to it.
To realize everyone really goes about, is doing exactly the same thing as I am, walking through town with headphones on.
For me, it does feel like a distraction, like I'm detaching myself from my surroundings, and usually when I'm out for a walk, I like to try and feel connected to my environment.
Over the past 30 years of listening on headphones and that becoming an everyday thing, it's almost impossible for me to even go round the corner to the corner shop without putting my headphones on. It's almost like I can't walk without them.
I'm suddenly become aware I'm blabbering on my own. Bit self-conscious now. Is my spine straight enough? Am I going fast enough? Slow enough? Let's get back to the music.
The ghosts of technology are all around us. I mean, there's lights blinking here that have been blinking. No one's switched them off in years. If you pull up the floor tiles here, there's like layers of wiring that go back to when the building was built in the 1950s. There was a layer of 50s wire, 60s wire, 70s wire, 80s wire. And in fact, one day when it gets fossilized into rock, you'll be able to see it as strata of different coppers and plastics.
Little characters and fantasies and like stories about what's going on around you.
Social experiment in a sense. I was watching how people would react to such weird circumstances. So observing people, commenting people.
I got a job at Granada Film Library in 1969, and instead of working with film straight away, the first job I had for Brian Moser, who was making a series called Disappearing World, was to go over to Tib Street, where there's lots of pet shops, or used to be, in what is now the Northern Quarter, and buy a load of budgie mirrors and plastic beads, huge box full, for them to give to the indigenous tribes that they were going to do their anthropological work with in Brazil.
And it's funny because there's a house now I can see with different colors matching the song.
Yeah, well, what sort of things are behind these weird thoughts? The unlikely colours.
But maybe I've always gamified things a little bit, like that thing where you have a race with some stranger, like a walking race.
And they also bought a dozen Russian shortwave radios, which were for the chiefs.
At the same time being, in the Amazon forest, but action happening, like.
That feeling of acceleration keeps coming to me.
Is it creepy to walk in step with somebody? Do they even know it's happening?
If you're in a dark room with a smoke machine, the music's going to sound better. Of course, drugs come into it, don't they?
Looking into people's eyes, there was a knowing.
It's kind of disorientating, this music, in one sense.
And the fantastic, beautiful music and connection.
Why is it always green? I'm thrown into a green landscape. Leaves made of plastic, that sort of thing.
Which one's that?
I mean, maybe I'm being overly influenced by the first song, but I'm imagining that they're in Japan. It's like in a little boxy apartment surrounded by loads of weird synths.
It transports me to Tokyo, although I haven't been there.
I wanted to be a dancer, but then I stopped growing. I was told that I was too small to be a dancer.
I can imagine taking a taxi, going to some warehouse rave, not knowing anybody, sweaty crowd, just losing myself.
I put music in, it influences me too much and makes me go too much into my own head. So I only use it when I actually want to do that.
And I remember a friend of mine saying to me, Adele, you've just got to come out dancing. It's just amazing. And I said, flipping out, I'm 31, I've done all my clubbing in my teens.
Them teaching me some Japanese words. No swear words though.
And my friend said, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old you are. So
All right, even though this track is not over, we're gonna go to the next track.
An important factor in testing this music out in the environment is to take it into clubs, which is what Andy's doing as a DJ, playing it alongside other people's records. You have to break out of the environment that you made the music in, because it has to work on a small scale and a big scale. Just taking the music out on headphones into the city and just hearing it in different environments.
So Manchester, long history of innovation, long history of industry, long history of immigration. It's kind of perfect melting pot, isn't it?
This is such a strange landscape as well. I think that the music is kind of emphasising that as well.
As they said, it's time and space, so you're looking at spatial.
Sometimes it feels like the city is nothing more than a photo opportunity.
Is this what the future is going to look like?
There was a period of electronic music that is full of dabblers, people that get technology and then they use that as a door to making music. You know, the automated music process allowed a different set of people in to that conversation. As a group, 808 State actually began dead in the centre of Manchester on Oldham Street, Affleck's Palace in fact, where Martin Price had the Eastern Bloc record store. When I look back on Eastern Bloc now, there was a real it was run by music enthusiasts that had some small amount of musical experience. Making records was the important thing, you know, to put a piece on vinyl was such an ambitious thing. So for instance, the first record we made with the people who eventually became 808 State was a record that had 3 bands on it that were mostly hip-hop based and the sort of thing that people would take into the shop. You know, they could do it in the bedroom as a demo and you wanted it a better quality to put on the record. And I had access to the studio because I was doing an engineering course. You know, the money was missing, and that's where the record shop came in. You know, they kind of put forward the money to start doing that. When we were first making 808 State Records, there was like almost like a Cold War futurism that a lot of electronic music wore on its sleeve when it was emerging in the 70s. An imagined futurism of automation and stuff, and that which goes hand in hand with like a lot of the automated music that it is. You know, it is machine music. The Granada studios had this Cold War white heat of technology Harold Wilson thing that I'd grown up with, and therefore it really resonated with a person my age.
That technology advances so much, but you know where that's come from, don't you?
808 State have left a massive data trail. You know, hundreds of thousands of floppy disks, old hard drives, and it kind of begs the question of like, what is the human element? What are those human decisions that keep getting made? Is it repetitive? Is there belligerence in it? Is there, mischief?
To be able to think about how like fractions are linked to chords, like sequences, and
if you could get those mischief algorithms into the machine, you know, the Northern Belligerence program.
yeah, so the two speak to each other so much, but that never gets like celebrated or pushed to the forefront when we teach maths, and I guess that's why people don't feel like there's that human connection there when there is.
So I'm just listening to this now, and we go from slightly glitchy, slightly edgy.
There is a humanness there, there is a personality there.
But music, I think you've got to be more attentive to it. Well, I think so, you know. Give it a bit of respect.
Again, referring back to cinema, films like Koyaanisqatsi with Philip Glass music that was very repetitive but in very complicated patterns that never repeated in a 4/4 way. You know, if that's in your consciousness and you're addressing 4/4 dance music, what you can do with a grid around a 4/4 is bound to throw up exploration. And you heard it in all kinds of records back then, how to play with time, how to do tricks with time, how to resolve time. And you don't have to think about it intellectually, because bodily you're doing that on the dance floor. It's the common factor in the rave thing was this massive empathy that went round. Might have been chemical. It actually was a point where barriers broke down and the social mix was wider. We were soundtracking that social event.
And that was the difference between going out in the 90s, raving, and when I was a teenager, going out doing the sort of handbaggy kind of dancing in the late 70s.
All the great art, all the great music, I suppose wouldn't exist in the same way if it wasn't for all the differences.
So when you think about where the city's going to be in like another 10 years, it's just going to look completely different.
Yeah, I think looking at some of these brick buildings and flats, and you're listening to this, it seems to change something about it. They're not as dull and boring as you'd think.
Exploitation and the links to slavery and the horrors of what went on in our mills and factories, and the role we played in capitalism, really, and that
just like copy and pasted buildings.
But yeah, it's what you want from music, really, isn't it? A meeting of two worlds.
And this music is quite, it's quite dreamlike, isn't it?
Anything, I suppose, and you know, constantly having to talk and being wired up. Not much space to really get away from it. You kind of have to talk about things.
Drank and drank and drank from being about 15 years old, and chain smoked, and just abused everything legal, and didn't really do me much good.
I mean, walking back from town, you know, Friday night, down here.
Sometimes with electronic music, you know, and you're out in nightclubs all the time, and what works in those quite harsh conditions, and they are sonically quite harsh conditions, you know, everything's way loud and way kind of like your sight's obliterated with everything's over the top. It has to be indestructible in those situations. And I found that, you know, in the transmission suite, it was softer kind of introspective kind of electronic music. A more classical approach to electronic music is what it threw up on that record for me.
All the stars lined up in Manchester. Music, the drugs, the vibe.
I was listening to music really loud because I'd been listening to it on the train, and I have no idea what happened, but I fell over and it was like really dramatic, and the music just completely disoriented me.
Really feeling that sweat that was such a part of the whole night.
I don't know how it works in the body, just like listening to it.
Matched the city in lots of ways that I wouldn't normally have paid attention to, as I generally wander around not with headphones or not listening to music in case I got run over.
I'm not one of these great dancers.
I was just on the floor and there was loud music and lots of people around.
Because I think the joy and the pain and the chaos of cities is that they're always changing, and everyone has a different experience, but we are all in the same space and we're listening to our own music.
I bought these headphones with the absolute, intention to listen to more music on them. Yeah, more music, more dancing, less TV, less news.
One of the things about being in this building is it's actually been designed to record sound in the whole building. In fact, even the corridors are muted. If you go into the big studios and shut the doors, you can almost hear yourself breathing in those spaces. And then when you burst out into central Manchester, where the building is located, the mayhem of the city just hits you smack in the face.